if we're going to fix the housing crisis that we're in, and it's a wicked crisis, we have to fix the housing approvals process. Our housing system is broken, and our cities are kind of broken too. That's the bad news. The good news is that fixing one of them will go a long way to fixing the other one. So how are our cities broken? Well, let me count the ways. Let's start with sprawl, urban sprawl. Our largest cities in Canada in the last couple of decades have grown collectively, have grown their footprint about the size of the city of Montreal. What's the impact of that? There are many. The costs of maintaining a city, a footprint of that size, are incredible, and I'll talk a little bit about that as I go along. If you think about things like transit, and Doug Ford, bike lanes, those things also cost money, and they cost more the bigger the city you have. And while we're growing like that, by the way, we're growing in numbers, for sure. But we're not growing as fast as the footprint is growing. We're sprawling faster than we're growing population-wise, which means we're all taking up more space. The equity gap in our cities is growing. There have always been, since the establishment of our cities in colonial Canada, equity gaps in our cities. And that comes as far back as the 100 plus years of exclusionary zoning that we have. But that's growing. And it's growing because as we sprawl, the municipal funds are moving out to the suburbs with that expansion. Participatory governance and engagement in cities is perhaps at a generational low, and that's a crisis too. People don't show up to vote. They don't show up to council unless maybe there's a development happening in their own backyards. That tends to get people out, and that's okay. People should care. But there are a lot of people who aren't showing up, and that is an issue. And the people who do show up don't necessarily represent everyone in the community. That's an issue as well. Municipal finances, as I said, are in crisis mode. We keep moving outwards, and we can't pay for it. We're losing green space. Even as we have expanded the footprint of our cities, Canadian cities have become about 5% less green over the last 20 years. That's a crisis too. We need to connect to nature. We need to have public spaces. We need to have places to be grounded. From a climate perspective, we know we have to be protecting the green space we have, and we're not. And all of this is happening in a really responsive way for municipalities. The development community is in the driver's seat. And this is not to vilify the development community, by the way. It's okay to make money, right? It's okay to be out there in your own interests. I'm getting paid to be here tonight, essentially. I'm paid to be a professor. I like my job. I get to do something that I think is in the public good. I get paid for it. That's okay. But the problem is the system is turned around from where it needs to be. And it's not like we have a system that's working for developers and not for municipalities. The system's actually not working for developers either. We've got to this point through a number of small steps over many, many years. And the point that we're at has landed us at the bottom end of the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, rankings on the length of time it takes to get housing approvals in Canadian municipalities, or in municipalities across the 37 member states. We're almost at the bottom. We measure our development approvals by years, not months. That should tell us something. And that has a cost impact as well. That costs money. The GTA is the worst for that, no surprise. And in some ways, that's an opportunity for small communities in the vicinity of Toronto, like Stratford. But if the system just has to continue in the same way and absorb the layers and layers of regulatory approvals which have continued to build over all these years, if the system is still set up to sprawl and to be responsive to what developers are coming to municipalities with, if the system is still set up to hear some voices and not others, and to hear no voices in meaningful, long-standing ways, we're just going to make the problem worse. Communities like Stratford do have a character, a historic character. Lots of communities across Ontario do. And a lot of people want to maintain that character or aspects of it. It does have to change, absolutely. But whatever that looks like isn't accidental. And right now it's being left to accidental. We didn't get to sprawl because we all thought we should live in sprawled communities where we're disconnected from each other and we have to drive all the time and we don't have access to all the sort of amenities and main streets and things like that people had in the past and could walk to school and all that stuff. Some of that might be true. I live in the swimming pool capital of Ontario. Maybe some people really, that's a choice. That's a fair choice for people to make. But it's also a question of what policy choices have been made to get us there. And it's going to take us a while to get out of that. This is not the exciting stuff, right? This is not the flashy announcements. This is not government saying, we've got the fix and let us make a big ministerial announcement and tell you how we're going to do it. But it is the stuff that has to happen. It's the scaffolding that has to happen so that we can have all the innovation happening in the private sector. So that we can have ADUs, additional dwelling units, and we can have different types of prefabricated homes and pattern books, and we can think about co-ops, and we can think about rent to own, we can do all the fun stuff. But if we don't have the scaffolding to build the kind of cities that we want with the vision we want and a process to get there efficiently, then we're kind of lost. So what's the solution? There are many. This is a multifaceted problem. But one of the solutions, I will posit to you, is that the municipality has to start acting like a developer. The municipality needs a vision. Yeah. It needs a vision that brings everyone along, and it needs a way to get from A to Z that actually gets us to that vision. The work that I do through the Housing Systems Innovation Lab at the Centre for Cities with the team there, we're really in the weeds right now. And I think that's where we have to be. We're in the weeds in a way that will look different, in testing approaches that will look different for every municipality. There are 444 across the province of Ontario. Every one of those will look different. But I want to talk to you just about a few sort of potential solutions that we're testing as we go. One of the things that's really exciting for me about where I live is we live at the border with the US. And that means we have access to conversations. This is a tricky time at the moment for all of us, but we have access to a lot of expertise and a lot of things that have been tested. And so some of what I'm talking to you about is reflecting a bit on some things that have worked in the US. And there are four, it's not a kit of parts. It's not a take it off the shelf and this is going to work everywhere, but 4 things I want to mention briefly. The first is target market analysis. The second is robust and ongoing community and private sector and developer participation in creation of a detailed vision for the city. The third is a community planning and permitting system that in a detailed way lays out and actually pre-approves some of what needs to be built. And the fourth is financial incentives. Target market analysis, first of all. So imagine that there's a grocery store that sells fruit, and the fruit that they sell is apples. They don't sell bananas or oranges or lychee fruit or kumquats. They just sell apples. And at some point, someone comes to the grocer and says, what kind of fruit do the people that buy from your store or that might like to buy from your store, what kind of fruit do they like? And she says, they like apples. Why? Well, because that's what people at her store buy. Luckily, there's something called target market analysis that business people can use in situations like that to figure out not just what has sold up till now, but also what might sell, what might their customers buy, what might future customers buy. And they can figure out whether that is just apples or whether it's apples and bananas and oranges and lychee and kumquats and who knows what else. And it's actually not different for housing. There are models out there, and I've seen them tested in the States in some cases, for target market analysis that actually allows us to pull out from the single thing that municipalities, that cities have mostly been building, which is single family dwellings, pull out from making all of our predictions about what housing we need based on that thing, because it's only the apples or the single family dwellings that have been for sale, and to really think in a nuanced way about what it is that we need. Is it condos? Is it multi-generational? Is it downsizing for older folks? Is it those young families that actually want to come? Is it young families who grew up? Is it young people who grew up in the neighborhood, in the community, and want to stay, who are priced out of many communities in Canada right now that they grew up in? And figure out what that thing is. So that's the first. And there's a technique to that. The second is about engaging people in a more meaningful way, including the development community from the start. Doing a robust community engagement process at the macro level. Again, we heard about visioning. It's visioning, right? Thinking about how do we set a vision for the community that we want to live in. How do we hear from the developers about how to do that in an effective way and how to make a process that actually works for them? How do we hear from people who live in the community now and want to, and then incorporate data about those who might want to be there? And that's not about town halls, by the way. We all love town halls, right? You can go to town halls, you see the placards, everybody gives you a nice presentation, you say your little bit, and you go home. This is about ongoing, comprehensive, careful, and micro-level planning. What is the vision we want for our community? How are we going to get there? What does that look like for this neighborhood? How far out are we going to go there? Do we actually want to maintain this town center like a town center? Are we okay with this starting to feel more suburban? Are we okay with losing some farmland over there, which we're losing, by the way, about 1,000 acres a day across Ontario? So what does that look like? And getting that buy-in on board. The third, then, a comprehensive planning and permitting system where you really get into the weeds. And now you're laying out, again, the municipality in the driver's seat, laying out what can be pre-approved. What do we know we need on this street? And can we actually fast forward some of those approvals so we don't have to go through 6 layers of approval? Maybe we can go through 2 instead, because we already know we've committed as a community to being okay with this. And people had their say. People got to show up, and lots of people hopefully got to show up and have their say at that point. So pre-approving so that those things start to move more quickly. And then lastly, financial incentives. It's not that municipalities aren't doing this. Yeah, some are, and I know there are those in the room who worked with municipalities. Community improvement plans, CIPs are happening in lots of municipalities across the province. There are ways already that developers can get tax breaks, that the municipality can sort of incentivize building in a particular neighborhood, on a particular street, for a particular reason, like affordable housing. But there's a whole suite of further incentives that are also possible, and one of those that is not being used yet in Ontario, to my knowledge, or just beginning to, that has a lot of opportunity, is tax increment financing. Again, a way of saying, as a municipality, we're willing to take a tax break, or to give a tax break, to a developer who's willing to show up and do this kind of building on this property. And we will cut your taxes for a while, and that will hurt a little bit because we are used to getting X dollars, and we're going to get half of that right now, and we're going to get half of that for a number of years. But what's going to happen, what's going to rise from that, is investment and building that is much higher value, and that over time, and possibly more dense, but at least higher value, and in its own way will give back much more than it took in terms of paying into the tax coffers. Again, it's okay to make money, right? No one's here to vilify the development community. There are really good, innovative and dedicated people doing good work in the private sector. And there are also a lot more small scale and developers and other folks who want to get in there, who want to be able to do small scale development in ways that our communities need it. But it's way too complicated right now. People can't afford the time. They can't afford the delays. It's prohibitive from a complexity perspective. All of this, tax increment financing, pre-approvals, a robust engagement process to front end and target market analysis that tells us how all of this should go, because we actually know what the community will bear, are all pieces of a puzzle that can come together in a way that builds the scaffolding that we need to really build the communities that we want. When we do that, we get to decide how much green space we need. We get to decide if we need parking on street everywhere, We get to decide where the public spaces need to be that we need to protect. We get to decide what percentage of green space we're protecting. We get to decide if we need bike lanes and transit and what that looks like. And we really get to think about all those things in a macro way that allows us to fix our broken cities and to make sure that they're places not that look like cookie cutters of each other as they grow, that don't make us feel disconnected from each other or only living in suburbs. Some people will want that. Not everybody does. That allow us to have that vision and implement it and actually make cities that are healthier, better for climate, way better for the municipal pocketbook, and overall more attractive places for all of us to live, work, play, enjoy our lives. Thank you very much.